Hi there, my name's TheTrueNev, I'm the only me there is, and welcome back to episode 34 of the Satisfactory Non-series, where I did not take this long to finish the build, but time being what it is, I just couldn't get it out sooner. Anywho, let's get into the completed Turbofuel factory, shall we? So I start off this video exactly where I left off my previous one, overlooking my very nice plastic setup. I used it to make plastic containers to hold packaged turbofuel. But before I could do that, I of course needed to unlock the turbofuel recipe for blenders. Once I had packaged turbofuel, I unlocked the final munition recipe for turbo rifle ammo, and thus my setup stage was finished. Immediately thereafter, I tore down my plastic setup and reworked it into its own separate turbofuel and smokeless powder factory, and on the other side I set up the blenders that would actually make the ammo. With all the factories for the main plant in place, I got to work on sourcing the rest of the resources. I started by expanding the railway out and towards the far end of the western coast, where I set up an absolutely tiny and minimalistic copper sheet factory. No, really, this thing is small. Boasting only 5 refineries running ridiculously underclocked, it was here that I would produce a grand total of 50 copper sheets. Those copper sheets would be used alongside the smokeless powder back at the main plant to create the 250 rifle ammo needed to produce 500 turbo rifle ammo per minute. And as you can see here, for these latest builds I started experimenting with beams and pillars and placement. The next and final factory setup was done at the very far side of the grassy plain starting location, where there was a normal sulfur node. Here I would overclock the miner Mark III to get all 600 sulfur and use a small amount of it to make the 33.334 black powder needed for the rifle ammo. And again, in a very miniature setup, just 2 assemblers, whilst the rest of the sulfur, mainly and mostly all 600, would go back on its own separately to feed into my turbofuel blenders. It's actually here that I began experimenting with the pillars before I made my way back. Once all the final preparations were done, I only needed to do one more thing to finish, and that was to place down my 267.77 fuel generators. And while I had originally thought of placing them in a nice curve along the side and out the back, I severely underestimated just how many fuel generators 267.77 were, which, to round things out, I turned into 268 by underclocking 2 of them. And so, after setting up the pipework for my turbofuel blenders, placing down all of my generators, and decorating the build appropriately, I finished the factory. Now, let's tour it. Starting out, as you can see, I've color-coded every building according to what they are making. As you can see in the very far back in the actual building, we've got the red blenders, making obviously the turbofuel. A bit more towards the foreground, we've got the 4 blenders making the fuel that is used to make the turbofuel. And even before that, we've got our 10 refineries making heavy oil residue. Now, they're making exactly 400 heavy oil residue, 200 of which are actually going into these blenders. The other 200 heavy oil residue are going into these 5 refineries at the midway point, or actually the start of the building, I guess you could say, where if we peek inside, you can see that, hey, the pipes carrying the heavy oil residue go inside, and out pops 600 petroleum coke. If we head back out and take a temporary detour down here where we can see that we have access to the production area, you can also see that I've carefully hidden away, or at least, you know, as much as possible anyway, all our cables. They run neatly under the floor and alongside the, I guess you could say, the ceiling of the floor, the underside. Carefully powering up every machine, and you know what, just forget you saw that. And then of course, if we head into the actual factory area, or well, the place where the actual turbofuel is made, we've got the 40 blenders. Now, as you can see, I played around with the glass and the lighting. Well, not really the lighting, there's no lighting, but with the glass anyway. Lots of natural lighting. We've got some nice rounded windows at the back. I made sure to focus on that. And then on either side, we've got our sort of snake-patterned windows as well. If we head down towards the left side of the build, we've got our rows of 278 fuel generators, all currently powered except for maybe a few. And let me just head outside so you can see it a little better. And there she is. What a beaut. And regarding what I said before about not being able to make that curve, well, even when I made it this long, it still sort of infringes on the edge of the world border, so much so that if you head towards that little corner at the end over there, even while flying, it can prove lethal. So it's definitely not a good thing to do that. Now, the reason I said that they're not all completely firing all cylinders, especially the ones at the back, is because unfortunately the 600 sulfur that is being transported, it's just not quite enough to handle the demand that all these blenders have. So instead of running the full 40,000 or so megawatts that I was expecting to get, I'm actually working with around, okay, it's actually kind of low here, but around 38,000. Yeah, 38,000, as you can see. Now, regardless of that bottleneck, I am quite happy with how this has come out. I may address it later on, but for now, yeah, the 3,400 or so sulfur that comes in every time the train comes in is, well, it has to be enough. And I'm sure you're wondering what this thing is. This was just my attempt at sort of decorating the wall, make it seem like as if this red vine-ish thing is sort of wrapping around or on top of the building. But I thought it looked pretty good, especially because it's not a symmetrical build, so, you know, I had to do something on this side so it wouldn't be so boring. And if we head out down this way, we have the other 20 refineries making heavy oil residue. This is the heavy oil residue that is purely used in the turbofuel blenders, alongside, of course, the sulfur, the regular fuel, and the petroleum coke. Heading a little further back out here, we can see the auxiliary turbofuel area, which is currently not running because, again, the sulfur just isn't reaching it. We've got the general setup, and then, of course, the two blenders making my actual ammo, which... look at it, and it's actually almost pretty full, so I can test this out just before this episode ends. And then lastly, at least as far as the factory goes, we've got the, I guess you could say, the aluminum casing annex, where I decided to toy around with colors and textures and just this weird window pattern, which I'll show you a little more inside. I absolutely adore the way this came out. It wasn't that hard to make either. And then on the other side, we've got, well, something that could most likely be better appreciated from the train, but still something I very much enjoy the way it came out, which would be, let me just step inside, a glass dome, which serves absolutely no purpose other than to, you know, kind of look cool. And this place is still as barren as it always was. I just decided to sort of coat it a bit with, like, you know, different floors, pillars. Again, played around with the windows a bit, trying to give it a little bit of structure, and just look at this. I love the way this came out. It is really nice. Really, really nice. And lastly, before I forget, I can't not show off the weird, you know, glass pyramids I made here at the front just for decorative purposes. I actually left a hole here to make it symmetrical with this other one, but this other one does have that purpose of, you know, letting this antenna out. I thought it looked nice. And of course, where would we be without showing off the train station? As you can see, I made this little experiment here. Nice curved window to sort of top off or cap off the actual train station. Just experimenting as I did with the pillars at the other two small factories. I very much enjoy the way this came out, as well as, you know me, I'm not big on clipping or experimenting, but this was just, I don't know, looks nice. And this is, of course, the only train station I didn't color code because I kind of got a little lazy at the end. But anywho, this is my completed Turbofuel factory. All in all, I love the way it came out. It's very experimental, very much different from the style I usually go for, but I really wanted to make it a little bit more special than just a, you know, just a box or just a whole bunch of factories on a single floor, which is why there's different levels of elevation and all that. And quite frankly, I'm not sure what to do next, other than, of course, experiment with the ammo, which I'm going to get to in just a moment. But truthfully, other than this, there's not much else I can do. Other than, of course, keep exploring, because we do have to explore the rest of the starting, you know, grassy fields area, and eventually, of course, get to the red jungle. I do have plans to go back to my blueprint manufacturer and make a few custom blueprints, which I will eventually do, and I will eventually show off, just because I've got some ideas in there. But anyway, that's enough talk for me. Let's actually go try this ammo out. The last of the munitions. Gotta love it. Alright, let's see. Where is there an enemy I can try this out on? Preferably not a bulb of, you know, flies. Maybe a hog or something. Let me just see here. Oh, there we go. Let's try it. Ooh, the more I shoot, the faster it gets. Interesting. Well, that was fun. But anyway, for now, I guess that's it for this video. If you liked it, then you know what to do. But as always, I'm the only me, so you be the only you. And see you in the next video, I guess.